A billionaire who could buy anything in the world broke down over a $2 meal in a place no one expected. The late afternoon sun stretches across a vast golden rice field, the kind that seems to glow like it holds its own quiet secret, the air thick with warmth and the soft hum of insects drifting lazily through the breeze, and somewhere along a narrow dirt path, a black SUV rolls forward slowly, its polished surface reflecting a world it doesn't belong to, a world too raw, too simple, too real for the man sitting inside it, Ethan Cole, 32, CEO of a multi-billion-dollar infrastructure empire, a man whose name opens doors in New York boardrooms and closes deals across continents, a man who measures success in square footage and quarterly returns, now sitting in silence, his tailored charcoal suit sharp against the dust-streaked window, his jaw set, his eyes distant, scanning a horizon that feels foreign in a way money has never been able to fix, and for a moment, just a moment, the noise of his world fades, no ringing phones, no urgent emails, no voices asking for decisions that move millions of dollars, just wind brushing against rice stalks and the faint sound of laughter somewhere in the distance, light, unfiltered, real, the kind of laughter he hasn't heard in years, not since before everything became numbers and negotiations, not since before loss turned warmth into something he learned to avoid, and then the SUV slows to a stop, the driver hesitates, uncertain, because ahead, the path narrows too much, and Ethan exhales. Short, controlled, already impatient. But something pulls his gaze again, something he doesn't immediately understand, a figure in the field, moving with quiet rhythm, bending, lifting, working, a girl in a simple brown BA outfit, sleeves rolled just enough, her long dark hair tied loosely behind her, strands catching the sunlight, her skin warm with the golden hue of the land itself, and she pauses, sensing the unfamiliar presence, turning slightly, her eyes meeting the tinted glass of the SUV, not intimidated, not impressed. Just curious, and then she smiles, not the kind practiced for politeness or gain, but something small and genuine, like she's acknowledging another human being instead of a status, and it unsettles him more than any confrontation ever could, because in his world, smiles always come with intention, but this one doesn't, this one just exists, and for reasons he can't explain, Ethan feels something shift, something subtle but undeniable, like a memory brushing against the edge of his mind. Something he hasn't allowed himself to feel in a very long time, and as the driver asks if they should turn back, Ethan doesn't answer right away, his eyes still fixed on that field, that girl, that moment that doesn't belong in his carefully controlled life, and then finally, almost quietly, he says, "Let's stop here." The engine goes quiet as the door opens, and for the first time in what feels like years, Ethan Cole steps out of a controlled environment into something completely unfiltered, the heat wrapping around him instantly, thicker than the conditioned air he is used to, carrying with it the scent of earth, water, and something faintly sweet he cannot name, and his polished shoes sink slightly into the uneven dirt as he takes a step forward, instinctively adjusting his cuff as if the gesture could anchor him back to familiarity, but nothing here responds to that kind of control, not the wind, not the field, and certainly not the girl who now walks toward him with an easy, unhurried pace, a woven hat hanging loosely from her hand as if time itself moves differently for her, and she stops a few feet away, tilting her head just slightly, studying him with open curiosity rather than caution, her eyes briefly scanning his suit, his watch, the car behind him, but without judgment, only quiet observation, and then she speaks, her voice light, carrying a gentle rhythm that feels grounded in the land around them, asking in simple English, "You lost?" And the question catches him off guard, not because he does not understand it, but because no one has asked him something so direct, so unconcerned with who he is, in a very long time, and he almost answers with something polished, something automatic, but instead, he pauses, glancing back at the narrowing path, then at the endless stretch of rice fields ahead, and for once, the truth comes easier than performance, maybe, he says, his voice quieter than usual, and she smiles again, a little wider this time, as if that answer makes perfect sense, as if being lost is not a problem to fix but simply a state to accept, and she gestures toward a small cluster of houses barely visible beyond the field, wooden walls softened by time, tin roofs catching the late sun. "Come. You look tired." "It is almost dinner," she says, as if inviting a stranger into her world is the most natural thing she could do, and Ethan hesitates, the part of him trained to calculate risk, to question intent, to measure every interaction against potential outcomes, immediately rising to the surface, but something else pushes back, something quieter but persistent, the memory of that unguarded smile, the absence of expectation in her voice. And before he can analyze it away, he nods, just once, and follows her along the narrow path, the sound of his footsteps uneven compared to her steady rhythm, the field brushing lightly against his legs, the air shifting as they move deeper into a place untouched by the structure of his world. And as they approach the house, he notices details he would normally overlook: a pair of worn sandals by the door, a line of freshly washed clothes moving gently in the breeze, a small wooden table set just outside, already prepared with simple dishes that release a warm, familiar aroma into the air, something savory, something slow-cooked, something that pulls at a place in his chest he does not immediately recognize, and she sets her hat down, stepping inside briefly before returning with an extra bowl, placing it on the table with quiet intention, then looking at him with the same calm certainty. "Sit," she says, not as a command, but as an invitation that leaves no room for overthinking, and for a moment, Ethan just stands there, a man who has negotiated billion-dollar contracts without hesitation, now unsure how to respond to a gesture this simple, this genuine, and then slowly, almost carefully, he takes a seat, the wood beneath him firm, real, grounding in a way nothing in his glass-walled offices has ever been, and as the first plate is set in front of him, steam rising gently into the fading light, he realizes he has stepped into something he does not understand yet, something that does not operate by the rules he has spent his entire life mastering. And for the first time in a long time, he does not try to control it. The steam rises slowly from the bowl in front of him, curling into the warm evening air as if carrying something more than just the scent of food, and Ethan sits there for a moment longer than necessary, his hands resting on his knees, his posture still holding the discipline of boardrooms and negotiations, yet his eyes fixed on something far simpler, far more unfamiliar, a clay pot of braised fish glistening under a thin layer of oil, the rich caramel color catching the fading sunlight, a plate of greens still wet from washing, a small bowl of rice placed carefully within reach, everything modest, everything intentional, nothing excessive, and across from him, my moves with quiet ease, adjusting the dishes, pouring water into a glass, not once looking at him to check for approval, not once waiting for a reaction, because to her, this is not a performance, this is just dinner, and that difference unsettles him more than anything else, because in his world, everything is measured by response, by validation, by outcome, but here, nothing is being asked of him, and when she finally sits down, she picks up her chopsticks without ceremony. Nodding lightly toward the food, "Eat before it gets cold," she says, her tone gentle but certain, and he hesitates just briefly, not because he does not know how to eat, but because he cannot remember the last time a meal was not scheduled, not optimized, not consumed between decisions, and slowly, almost carefully, he reaches forward, his fingers slightly stiff as he picks up the utensils, the unfamiliar weight grounding him in the moment, and he takes a small portion of rice, then a piece of fish, the sauce clinging to it with a richness that feels almost too bold for something so simple, and as he brings it to his mouth, there is no anticipation, no expectation, just a quiet curiosity, and then the taste lands, deep, warm, layered in a way that does not demand attention but earns it, and something inside him pauses, not dramatically, not all at once, but enough for him to notice, enough for him to stop mid-motion, his eyes lowering slightly as the flavors settle, and without realizing it, he takes another bite, slower this time, more aware, as if trying to understand what exactly he is feeling, and across from him, Mai continues eating as she always does, occasionally glancing up, not to observe him closely, but simply to share the space, and after a few moments, she speaks again, casual, unforced. "My mother taught me that recipe," she says, her voice soft, her eyes drifting briefly toward the field beyond the house. "She said food should make people feel like they belong, even if they are far from home," and the words land differently than the food, sharper, more precise, finding something in him that he has kept buried under years of discipline, and he nods slightly, not trusting himself to respond right away, because the truth is, he does not feel like he belongs anywhere anymore, not in the cities he builds, not in the spaces he owns, not even in the life he has constructed so carefully, and yet here, in a place he never planned to be, sitting at a table he did not choose, eating food made by someone who does not know his name, there is a strange, quiet pull, something that does not ask him to prove anything, something that does not measure his worth, and he takes another bite, this time without hesitation, the warmth settling deeper, spreading slowly, not just through his body but somewhere else, somewhere less defined, and for the first time in a long time, the constant noise in his mind softens, just enough for him to hear something else, the faint echo of a memory he cannot fully grasp yet, something tied to a kitchen, to a voice, to a version of himself that existed before success rewrote everything, and he sets his chopsticks down for a second, his fingers pressing lightly against the edge of the table as if grounding himself in the present, and when he looks up again, his gaze lingers not on the food, but on the simplicity of her presence, the way she exists without pretense, without expectation, and quietly, almost to himself, he says, "It tastes familiar," the words coming out softer than intended, and she smiles, not asking what he means, not needing an explanation, just accepting it as enough, as if sometimes, familiarity does not need to be explained, only felt, and the sun dips lower, casting longer shadows across the field, the world around them slowing into evening, and somewhere between the silence and the taste, between the memory and the moment, something in Ethan begins to shift, not visibly, not completely, but undeniably. The evening settles gently around them, the sky shifting into soft shades of amber and fading blue, and the quiet becomes deeper, more present, not empty but full of small, living details, the distant sound of water moving through narrow canals, the occasional rustle of leaves, the low hum of insects beginning their nightly rhythm, and Ethan finds himself still sitting at the table long after the first wave of hunger has passed, his plate no longer full but not quite empty either, as if he is unconsciously slowing down, stretching out something he does not yet understand, and Mai stands to gather a few dishes, her movements light, unhurried, placing them into a basin with the same quiet care she has shown all evening, and for a moment, he watches her without thinking, noticing how natural everything feels here, how nothing is forced, how nothing is performed. And it unsettles him again, not in a harsh way, but in a way that makes him aware of how different his own world is, how every action he takes is calculated, optimized, evaluated, and here, there is none of that, just presence, just routine, just life unfolding without needing to be managed, and he shifts slightly in his seat, his gaze drifting beyond the small house toward the field, now darker, the golden color replaced by a soft, shadowed green under the dimming sky, and he realizes something quietly unsettling. He has not checked his phone once, not since stepping out of the car, not since entering this place, and instinctively, his hand moves toward his pocket, brushing against the familiar shape of the device, but he stops, his fingers lingering there for a second before pulling back, as if he is choosing, consciously or not, to remain here just a little longer, and Mai returns, setting down a small cup of tea in front of him, the steam rising faintly, carrying a subtle herbal scent, and she sits again, this time more relaxed, her posture slightly leaning back, as if the day is finally releasing its hold on her, and she glances at him briefly, not with expectation, but with a quiet curiosity that feels almost patient, and after a moment, she asks, "You travel far," and the question is simple, but it lands heavier than it should, because the answer is complicated in ways he rarely allows himself to admit, and he considers giving a short, easy response, something vague, something distant, but instead, he exhales softly, his voice lower, less guarded. "Far enough," he says, and she nods as if that is enough, as if she understands that some distances are not measured in miles. And the silence returns, but it is not uncomfortable, it is not filled with the need to speak, it simply exists, shared between two people who have nothing to prove to each other, and Ethan leans back slightly, his shoulders relaxing in a way they have not in years, the tension he carries like a second skin slowly easing, almost without his permission, and as he lifts the cup, taking a small sip, the warmth settles into him, gentle, steady, and for a brief moment, something flickers again. Clearer this time, a memory not fully formed but close, the outline of a kitchen, the soft clatter of dishes, a voice humming quietly in the background, and he blinks, his grip tightening slightly around the cup as if holding onto something that might slip away, and he lowers it slowly, his gaze unfocused for just a second before returning to the present, and across from him, Mai watches, not intrusively, not questioning, just present, as if she senses something shifting without needing to name it, and then she speaks again, softer this time, almost like she is offering something without asking for anything in return. "You can stay tonight if you want," she says, her tone matter-of-fact, as if it is the most normal thing in the world. The road is hard in the dark, and Ethan looks at her, really looks this time, searching for any sign of hesitation, any hint of expectation, but there is none, only that same quiet openness, that same grounded certainty, and for a moment, he does not answer, because the decision feels bigger than it should, not because of the place, but because of what it represents. Staying means stepping further into something unknown, something unstructured, something that cannot be controlled or predicted, and yet, leaving now feels equally strange, as if he would be walking away from something he has not fully understood yet, something he is not ready to let go of, and the air grows cooler, the last light fading into night, and finally, almost without thinking, he nods, just once, his voice steady but softer than before, "Okay," and the word lands simply, but it carries more weight than he realizes, because in that moment, he is not just choosing to stay in a place, he is choosing, even if only slightly, to step outside the life he has always known, and neither of them says anything more about it, because nothing more needs to be said, and as the night settles fully around them, something quiet, something unseen, begins to take root. The night deepens slowly, not with sudden darkness but with a gentle settling, as if the world is lowering its voice, and Ethan lies awake on a simple wooden bed inside the small house, a thin woven blanket resting over him, the ceiling above bare and unfamiliar, the air warm but moving softly through an open window, carrying the distant sound of water and the quiet rhythm of life that does not stop when the sun disappears, and for the first time in years, there are no city lights bleeding through the curtains, no distant traffic, no constant hum of electricity, just silence layered with small, living sounds, and it is this silence that keeps him awake. Not because it is uncomfortable, but because it is different, because it leaves space for thoughts he has spent years avoiding, and he shifts slightly, staring upward, his mind instinctively reaching for distraction, for the structured noise of his usual life, but it finds none, and instead, something else begins to surface, slowly, quietly, like a memory rising through still water, and at first it is only fragments, the faint image of a small kitchen, worn but warm, a pot simmering on a stove, the soft clink of a spoon against ceramic, and a voice, low and gentle, humming a tune he cannot quite place, and his chest tightens just slightly, his breath catching in a way he does not expect, and he closes his eyes, not to sleep, but to hold on to the feeling, to understand it, because it has been so long since anything has felt this close, this real, and the memory sharpens just a little, enough for him to recognize it, his mother, standing by the stove, turning slightly as if she senses him watching, her expression calm, her presence steady, the kind of quiet strength that never needed to be spoken aloud, and then just as quickly, the image fades, not violently, not abruptly, but like something gently pulled away, leaving behind only the echo of warmth and the weight of absence, and Ethan exhales slowly, his hand resting against his chest as if to steady something inside him, something unfamiliar and unsettling, because it is not pain in the way he understands it, it is something softer, deeper, something he has not allowed himself to feel in years, and he turns his head slightly toward the open window, the faint glow of moonlight stretching across the floor, and outside he can hear movement, light footsteps, the quiet shifting of someone still awake, and after a moment, he sits up, the decision coming not from logic but from something quieter, something he does not question, and he steps outside, the night air cooler now, brushing gently against his skin, and he sees her, sitting on a low wooden step, her arms resting loosely around her knees, her gaze directed toward the field, now silvered under the moonlight, and she does not turn immediately when he approaches, as if she already knows he is there. And when she finally glances up, her expression is calm, unsurprised. "You cannot sleep," she says softly, not as a question, and he shakes his head slightly, stepping closer but not too close, maintaining a distance that feels respectful, natural, and for a moment, neither of them speaks, the silence settling between them again, but this time it feels different, deeper, as if something unspoken is being shared, and after a while, he lowers himself onto the step beside her, the wood firm beneath him, grounding in a way that feels unexpectedly comforting, and he looks out at the field, the endless stretch of quiet, the absence of urgency, and without planning to, without filtering the words the way he always does, he says, "I used to remember things like this," his voice low, almost uncertain, and she turns her head slightly, listening without interrupting, without pushing, just present, and he continues, slower now, choosing each word as it comes, but somewhere along the way, I stopped, and the admission hangs in the air, simple but heavy, because it is not something he has ever said out loud before, not to anyone. And Mai does not respond immediately, she does not offer advice, does not try to fix it, and instead, After a moment, she says quietly, "Maybe you did not stop," her voice steady, "Maybe you just forgot how to listen," and the words settle into him in a way he does not expect, not sharp, not overwhelming, but precise, like they have found the exact place they were meant to reach, and he looks at her then, really looks, searching for something he cannot quite define, but all he finds is sincerity, calm and unshaken, and for a brief moment, something shifts again. Something small but undeniable, like a door opening just slightly inside him, letting in something he has kept out for far too long, and he exhales, slower this time, his shoulders easing, his gaze returning to the field, and the night continues around them, quiet, steady, holding space for something neither of them fully understands yet, but both can feel beginning to take shape. Morning arrives not with noise but with light, soft and gradual, slipping through the open window and stretching across the wooden floor, touching the edges of the room before settling gently on Ethan's face, and for a moment, he does not move, not because he is still asleep, but because he is aware, quietly aware of something different, something he cannot immediately name, the absence of urgency, the absence of pressure, no alarms, no scheduled calls, no expectations waiting for him the second his eyes open, just light, warmth, and the distant sound of life beginning again outside. And when he finally sits up, his movements are slower than usual, less precise, as if his body has not yet decided to return to its usual rhythm. And he runs a hand through his hair, exhaling softly as he takes in the simple room once more, the same bare walls, the same wooden furniture, but now it feels less unfamiliar, less distant, as if something in him has adjusted overnight, and when he steps outside, the air greets him with a coolness that quickly gives way to warmth, the early sun casting a pale gold across the rice field, the dew still clinging to the tips of each stalk, reflecting light in a way that makes the entire field shimmer quietly, and Mai is already there, standing at the edge of the field, her sleeves rolled again, her posture steady, moving with the same calm rhythm he noticed the day before, and she glances over when she hears his footsteps, offering a small nod instead of a greeting, as if words are not necessary here, as if presence is enough, and he walks closer, stopping just beside her, his gaze following hers across the field, and for a moment, neither of them speaks, the silence once again comfortable, shared, and then she hands him a small bundle of rice stalks without explanation, her expression calm, almost expectant, and he looks at it, then at her, a faint uncertainty crossing his face, and she smiles just slightly. "You try," she says, simple, direct, and he hesitates, not because the task is difficult, but because he is not used to not knowing how to do something, not used to being the one learning instead of leading, and yet, he takes the bundle, his fingers adjusting awkwardly at first, his movements stiff, unpracticed, and she watches quietly, not correcting him immediately, allowing him to figure it out, to feel the rhythm on his own, and after a few moments, she steps closer, guiding his hands lightly, showing him how to move, how to cut, how to gather. Her touch brief, respectful, focused only on the task, and something about that simplicity, that lack of expectation, shifts something again inside him, because there is no judgment here, no pressure to perform, only patience, only presence, and slowly, his movements begin to follow hers, still imperfect, still uneven, but more natural, more grounded, and as the minutes pass, something else happens, something subtle but undeniable. The noise in his mind quiets again, the constant calculations, the endless analysis, all fading into the background, replaced by something far simpler, the rhythm of movement, the feeling of the earth beneath his feet, the sound of the wind brushing through the field, and he realizes, almost with surprise, that he is not thinking about anything else, not his company, not his schedule, not the deals waiting for him, just this moment, just this action, and when he straightens up after a while, his breath slightly heavier, a faint trace of effort visible on his face, he lets out a small, unexpected laugh, the sound quiet but real, and Mai looks at him, her eyes softening just slightly, as if she has been waiting for that, not the laugh itself, but what it represents, and she says nothing, only nods once, as if acknowledging something unspoken, and they continue working side by side, the sun rising higher, the light growing stronger, and time passes in a way that feels both slow and fast, measured not by minutes but by movement, by presence, and when they finally stop, standing at the edge of the field, looking out over what they have done, Ethan wipes his hands lightly against his pants, his posture different now, less rigid, more at ease, and he exhales, longer this time, his gaze lingering on the field before shifting to her, and for a moment, he says nothing, because the words feel unnecessary, because what he is feeling does not need to be explained, and yet, quietly, almost to himself, he says, "I forgot what this feels like." And the admission is simple, but it carries weight, because it is not just about the work, not just about the field, but something deeper, something he is only beginning to understand, and Mai looks at him. Her expression calm, steady, and she responds just as simply, "Then maybe you are remembering," and the words settle into him, not as a correction, but as an opening, a possibility he has not considered before, and as the sun continues to rise, casting light across everything in sight, something inside him continues to shift, slowly, quietly, but undeniably, as if he is stepping into a version of himself he thought was long gone. The sun stands higher now, no longer soft but steady and bright, stretching across the field with a quiet authority, and the rhythm of the morning has settled into something natural, something unspoken yet understood, the kind of rhythm that does not demand attention but shapes everything within it. And Ethan stands at the edge of the field, his hands no longer clean, a faint trace of earth still clinging to his fingers, his shirt slightly creased, no longer untouched, and for a moment, he does not move, his gaze drifting across the rows they have worked through, the pattern imperfect but real, and there is a quiet sense of completion in it, something small but meaningful, something he did not expect to feel from such a simple task. And beside him, Mai adjusts the bundle of rice in her arms, her movement steady, practiced, as if this has always been her world, always been enough, and he watches her again, but this time differently, not as an observer of something foreign, but as someone beginning to understand its value. And just as the moment begins to settle, just as the silence finds its balance again, a distant sound cuts through the calm, faint at first but unmistakable, the low hum of an engine approaching along the narrow dirt path, and Ethan's posture shifts almost instinctively, his shoulders tightening just slightly, his attention drawn toward the source, and within seconds, the black SUV comes into view, its presence sudden, out of place against the softness of the field, its polished surface catching the sunlight in sharp contrast to everything around it, and the driver steps out quickly, followed by a second man in a pressed shirt, holding a tablet, his expression focused, urgent, and the moment they see Ethan, they move toward him with purpose, their pace faster, their energy completely different from the quiet rhythm of the morning, and the shift is immediate, almost jarring, as if two separate worlds have collided without warning, and the man with the tablet speaks first, his voice controlled but edged with concern. "Mr. Cole, we have been trying to reach you for hours," and the name lands heavily in the open air, sharper than anything that has been spoken here before, and Ethan does not respond right away. His gaze flickering briefly toward Mai, who stands still now, the bundle in her hands forgotten for a moment, her eyes moving from the men to him, her expression not shocked, not dramatic, but quietly processing, as if a piece of the picture has just shifted into place, and the man continues, his words coming quickly, efficient. "The investors are waiting, the meeting has already been delayed twice, and the proposal for this region needs your final approval today," and the weight of those words hangs between them, heavy, familiar, pulling Ethan back toward the world he stepped out of, the world that runs on deadlines and decisions, the world that does not pause, and for a second, he feels it again, that familiar pressure, the instinct to respond, to take control, to move forward without hesitation, but something holds him in place, something quieter but stronger than before, and he glances down at his hands, still marked by the morning, then back at the field, then finally at Mai, and in her eyes, there is no accusation, no disappointment, only a quiet understanding, as if she already knows that this moment was always going to come, and that whatever happens next is his choice to make. And the man with the tablet shifts slightly, lowering his voice just enough to signal urgency without breaking professionalism. "Sir, we need to leave now if we are going to make it back in time," and Ethan exhales slowly, the sound steady but deeper than before, as if he is releasing something he has been holding without realizing it, and for a moment, everything narrows, the field, the car, the people, the decision, and he realizes something with a clarity he has not felt in years. This is not just about a meeting, not just about a project, it is about which version of his life he is going to return to, and whether he is willing to carry what he has felt here back with him or leave it behind like everything else he has outgrown. And he straightens slightly, his posture shifting not into the rigid control of his usual self, but into something steadier, more grounded, and when he finally speaks, his voice is calm, controlled, but different. "Give them another hour," he says, the word simple but decisive, and the man hesitates, clearly unprepared for that response, but nods quickly, stepping back toward the car to relay the message, and the tension does not disappear, but it changes, softens just enough to make space again, and Ethan turns back toward the field, toward the place that has quietly undone something inside him, and for the first time, the two worlds are no longer completely separate, they are touching, overlapping, forcing him to see them both clearly, and the question is no longer whether he belongs to one or the other, but what he is willing to change now that he has seen both. The air feels different after that moment, not heavier, not lighter, but sharper, as if everything has come into clearer focus, and Ethan stands still for a second longer than expected, watching as his assistant steps aside, lowering his voice into the phone, trying to manage a situation that no longer feels as urgent as it once did, and behind him, the SUV waits, engine idling softly, a quiet reminder of the life that is ready to pull him back at any second, and yet, when Ethan turns again, his gaze does not go to the car, it goes to Mai, who has not moved far, who now stands a few steps away, the bundle of rice set down beside her, her hands resting loosely at her sides, her expression calm, but no longer as open as before, not closed, not distant, just aware of something that has shifted, something that has been revealed without needing explanation, and for a moment, neither of them speaks, because the truth is already there, hanging between them, simple and undeniable, and Ethan takes a step toward her, then another, his movement slower. Now, more deliberate, not driven by urgency but by intention, and when he finally stops in front of her, there is no need for introduction, no need to explain who he is, because that part of the story has already been told, not by him, but by the world he carries with him, and still, he says quietly, "I did not tell you," the words simple, but carrying more weight than they should, and she looks at him, her eyes steady, searching, not for the title, not for the wealth, but for something else. Something more human, and after a brief pause, she nods once, not accusing, not surprised, just acknowledging, "You did not," she replies, her voice calm, and the silence that follows is not uncomfortable, but it is different now, layered with understanding, with distance that did not exist before, and Ethan exhales slowly, his gaze dropping for a moment before returning to hers, and this time, when he speaks, his voice is softer, stripped of the usual certainty. "I forgot how to say simple things," he admits, and the honesty in that moment is quiet, but real, because it is not an excuse, not a defense, just a truth he is only beginning to recognize, and Mai watches him for a second longer, her expression unchanged, but something in her eyes shifts, not fully closing the distance, but not pushing him away either, and she steps back slightly, creating space, not out of rejection, but out of clarity. "Your world is very big," she says gently, her gaze flickering briefly toward the SUV, toward the men waiting. "Mine is small," and the words are not bitter, not resentful, just factual, grounded in the reality she knows, and Ethan follows her gaze, then looks back at her, and for the first time, he does not see the difference as something abstract, something theoretical. He sees it clearly, the space between them, the weight of it, and the choice it represents, and he nods slowly, accepting it, not trying to dismiss it or smooth it over, because he knows now that it cannot be ignored, and yet, he does not step away, he does not turn back to the car, not yet, and instead, he says quietly, "It is big, but it is not full," and the pause in his voice is small, but it carries everything he cannot fully explain, the emptiness, the distance, the years spent building something that never felt like it belonged to him, and Mai listens, her expression softening just slightly, not because his world has changed, but because she can hear the truth in his voice, and after a moment, she looks out at the field again, the sunlight now stronger, the day moving forward without waiting for either of them, and she speaks again. "Then you have to decide what you want to carry with you," she says, her tone calm, steady, because you cannot carry everything, and the words settle into him with a quiet precision, not as advice, but as something deeper, something that does not need to be argued or explained, and he stands there, absorbing it, understanding it in a way he cannot ignore, because for the first time, the decision in front of him is not about profit or expansion or timing, it is about meaning, about what stays and what gets left behind, and behind him, the assistant steps forward again, hesitating just slightly before speaking. "Sir, we are ready," and the world waits, the field waits, the moment holds, and Ethan closes his eyes briefly, just for a second, as if marking something, as if choosing something, and when he opens them again, his gaze is clearer, steadier, and he turns slightly, not fully away from Mai, not fully toward the car, but standing between both, no longer pulled entirely in one direction, and for the first time, he understands that whatever he does next will not erase what he has found here, but it will define whether he is willing to protect it or let it fade like everything else he has left behind for a moment. Nothing moves, not the car, not the men waiting, not even the wind across the field, as if the world itself is holding its breath, waiting for a decision that is far greater than a delayed meeting, and Ethan stands there between two lives. One built over years of ambition and precision, the other discovered in less than 24 hours, quiet, unplanned, but undeniable, and he looks at Mai again, really looks, not as someone passing through, not as someone observing, but as someone who understands what is at stake, and there is no demand in her eyes, no expectation, only a calm acceptance of whatever he chooses, because her world does not depend on his decision, it will continue without him, steady, grounded, whole, and that realization settles into him with a clarity that is almost startling, because for the first time, he sees that what he has found here is not something fragile, not something that needs to be saved or protected, but something strong enough to exist on its own, and the only question left is whether he is willing to change in order to be part of it, and slowly, he turns toward his assistant, his posture straight but no longer rigid, his voice calm, controlled, but carrying a weight that is different from before. Call them, he says, the word simple, but final, and the assistant pauses, unsure for a brief second. Sir, and Ethan holds his gaze, steady, unwavering. Tell them we are not moving forward with the project, and the silence that follows is immediate, sharp, not loud but heavy, because those words do not just cancel a meeting, they redirect something much larger, something that has already been set into motion, and the assistant blinks, processing, his instinct to question rising. But something in Ethan's expression stops him, something firm, something decided, and he nods quickly, stepping back, already reaching for his phone, his voice low as he begins to relay the message. And behind him, the driver remains still, the engine still running, but the purpose of the car suddenly uncertain, and Ethan exhales slowly, the breath deeper, fuller, as if something inside him has just shifted into place, something that has been out of alignment for years finally settling, and when he turns back to Mai, there is no hesitation in his movement, no distance in his gaze, just a quiet certainty, and for a moment, neither of them speaks, because the decision has already said everything that needs to be said, and then she looks at him. Her expression softer now, not because of what he has given up, but because of what he has chosen, and she asks simply, "Are you sure?" And the question is not doubt, not challenge, but care, the kind that allows space for truth, and Ethan nods once, his voice steady, but warmer than it has been at any point before. "Yes," he says, and then after a brief pause, he adds, quieter, but more certain, "I think this is the first time I am choosing something that feels right, not just something that looks right," and the honesty in his words lingers between them, simple but complete, and Mai studies him for a moment longer, as if weighing not the decision itself, but the change behind it, and then she smiles. Small but real, the same kind of smile that first unsettled him, now grounding him instead, and she nods, as if accepting not just his choice, but the person he is becoming, and the field stretches out behind her, golden again under the full strength of the sun, alive, steady, unchanged, and yet everything feels different, because now he sees it clearly, not as something distant, not as something separate, but as something he is part of. And the car remains where it is, the men still working through the consequences of a decision they did not expect, but Ethan does not look back again, not because his past no longer matters, but because for the first time, it no longer defines him, and instead, he steps forward, closing the space between himself and the life he has only just begun to understand, not rushing, not forcing, just moving with intention, with presence, with a quiet certainty that does not need to prove itself. And as the day continues, as the world resumes its natural rhythm, something new settles into place, something that cannot be measured in numbers or controlled by plans, something built not on ambition, but on meaning, and for the first time in a long time, Ethan Cole does not feel like he is searching for something, because he has finally allowed himself to stay.